our focus to matters IMF. The loan that the IMF was supposed to give the country, that is about 256 billion shillings. But before that story, before I get in that interview with Nambale, Member of Parliament Sakwa Bunyasi, on a bill that he wants to introduce in Parliament just as a way of trying to tame the country's appetite on borrowing, and that has been a major concern to the country. I'd like us to have a look at a story about Kenyans' reactions on IMF, and that is the fury over IMF loans, and that is an issue that has made the headlines over the last couple of days, and Kenyans continue to actually express their displeasure over the International Monetary Fund's move to once again grant Kenya a loan of 255 billion shillings. Now, many Kenyans who have signed an online petition are unhappy over the manner in which the government has spent COVID-19 funds, with some saying there is no proper accountability. KTN's Ashley Mazuri reports.
Hours after the International Monetary Fund approved the disbursement of 255 billion shillings to Kenya, Kenyans reacted immediately, with many expressing their disapproval online. Hashtags Stop Loaning Kenya and Stop Giving Kenya Loans trended for the better part of the weekend, and today a new hashtag popped up, hashtag Dear IMF. In the various hashtags, Kenyans on social media platforms took the chance to air the grievances, with many saying before loans are issued, there needs to be accountability. Others were simply angry about the government's insatiable appetite for racking up debt. Some citizens have even gone a step further to start an online petition seeking to stop loans by IMF to the government of Kenya. So far, more than 150,000 Kenyans have signed the petition.
Hizo pesa kama ungeweza kuwajibika katika kila jambo inaweza kuwa mzuri. Lakini mwishowe utakuja usikie story kwamba pesa iliende ikakuwa mwishowe tubaki hapo mahali tunakuanga kawaida.
Though IMF is yet to respond to Kenyans' plea, economist Ken Gishinga claims from the IMF perspective, it is easy to issue loans because the country has never defaulted.
From the Kenyans who are sort of agitating online, I think they're trying to raise the question that we might see increased taxes, we might see diversion of funds from key social sectors to be able to repay, and that might have major social consequences.
Kenya's debt appetite has been on the rise. Since President Uhuru Kenyatta assumed office, the country's debt level has grown by 289.5%. In June 2013, Kenya's debt stood at 1.9 trillion shillings. It rose to 2.8 trillion shillings in 2 years and has been on an upward trajectory ever since. According to the latest data, as of January 2021, Kenya's debt stood at 7.4 trillion shillings. Public debt is expected to hit 10.3 trillion shillings by the time President Uhuru Kenyatta leaves office. Kenyans' decision to take the bull by the horns has started attracting attention, and all eyes are on IMF. It's now a matter of wait and see on whether the people's voice will make a difference. Ashley Mazuri, KTN News.
So it's time to see whether the people's voice will be heard. Kenyans have decided to take their fight to the doorstep of the IMF. Wait and see what the IMF will say. And on to the same issue, I'd like us now to bring in Nambale, Member of Parliament Sakwa Bunyasi, on this, because I understand he's supposed to be tabling a bill on the floor of the House when it comes to taming that borrowing appetite by the government, which has been a major concern to Kenyans. And that's why there's that online petition that Kenyans have been signing, actually, as a way of asking IMF not to release the loan that they're giving the country. And thank you so much, Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, for joining us us here on KTN News Center this morning. Before we delve into that bill that you want to bring on the floor of the House, let's talk about that decision, your take, your sentiment on that decision by Kenyans to decide to go to IMF personally, to have that direct conversation with IMF about the loan that they want to give the country, because it looks like Kenyans are feeling like the government has not heard their cry. So it's about time that we had that conversation with IMF directly.
Thank you very much indeed. I think it's a wonderful development and a maturing of the Kenyan public to take on issues of this kind. Every nation out there does get a way in which they express their views, some through their legislatures, some through civil society indeed. And those lending institutions do listen. It's a form of public participation. The questions that the IMF asks many times are similar questions that the citizens would have asked as well. For example, we have issues of the financial management and governance that Kenyans are always complaining about. When they talk about, they may not use all those terms, when they talk about KEMSA, SGR, the dams, and so on and so forth. They're really essentially asking questions of the prudence in the use of public resources, fearing that these public resources, to the extent they're wasted, or because of graft not applied to what's supposed to be done, they can't develop the country.
All right.
Now, when you go to IMF, any country goes to IMF, they go there knowing that there's just one simple arithmetic. IMF will tell you, you must balance your expenditures with your revenue. You must bring up your revenues to finance your expenditures. And if you must borrow, like most countries will, borrow only what you can afford to pay sustainably.
All right.
What does sustainable borrowing mean? It simply means don't borrow to a point where the payment and service of that debt would deny you essential services that you need to provide to your citizens.
But then,
essential services in health, in education, and so on.
But then you know,
what this bill. Okay.
But then some time back the IMF gave Kenya, the Kenyan government, conditions in terms of if we would really need to sustain a borrowing appetite, what the government needs to do.
Yes. Yes, they did. They did. But the last year's borrowing was intended to be the first step. This is the second. I'm sure there will be additional borrowings, by the way, because the IMF role is to stabilize the economy. They stabilize the economy by agreeing with government on a framework of actions that they should take that will be able to reduce, contain expenditure as they raise revenue. And remember, raising revenue means usually raising taxes. And I think it is only beginning last year, and perhaps early this year, the Kenyans are rebelling against tax increases. They feel that it's true when they are stressed with COVID and slowing down in the economy, which means household incomes are impacted. Increasing taxes makes them spend more, makes them poorer. Let's put it that way.
All right.
And I think it's a good thing to do. Government should rule knowing that there are limits to how much they can raise taxes, and therefore there are limits to how much they can spend on what they want to spend, no matter how good it seems. A good thing may be good for the future, but not good for now.
All right. But
what will come into the future that you're spending now, you're putting on this generation to finance, and they're saying no. And I think that's something that we need to listen to.
All right, so let's talk about that bill that you're about to table on the floor of the House so that it can be debated upon and passed, about trying to tame, the government's appetite on borrowing. And it's very timely because at the same time, members of the public, Kenyans, have blamed their representatives, members of parliament, for failing to put the government on check when it comes to borrowing, because the government has also raised the ceiling, giving the government that room to borrow more funds to fund different government projects.
Yes, there are three components, I would say, from just for the sake of this kind of interview, to make it brief. One, that what comes out as a proposal for expenditure through budgets and so on must be evaluated at the gate. Before an activity or a project enters the budget process, it must have been assessed to be viable, to be one that gives positive returns to the economy. And the one whose costs are as close to true costs as possible. Not too much padded. There's always some padding, I presume, but not excessively padded. For example, when we heard about the SGR, the numbers that were being thrown around indicated a padding of probably 50% or something like that. That's really high. That could have been, may not be right, but it means that the padding was excessive. Two, when you get parastatals that you used to pay to the Treasury, like Kenya Power and Lighting, a monopoly, a service provider, who charges for installation, who charges for every unit you use, are still in deep debt. And that's not debt for generation. That's not debt for transmission. That's debt just for distribution. Then something's obviously very wrong. And clearly what this bill is saying is that these costs need to be evaluated in terms of their costs and their benefits before they enter the budget stream. And once they enter the budget stream, the expenditure should follow closely what was intended so that they can get the outcomes you are seeking. If there is theft or wastage, obviously, then you cannot achieve those goals. That's the first part at the entry point. It is saying in the middle of it, once it has entered, if it exceeds, the revenues are not enough and the expenditure is higher, that particular loan must be closely evaluated relative to what it's going to finance. That's already in the law. Particularly for external borrowings, you must say where you're going to use the money for. It is normally in development expenditure, not recurrent. So it wants to tie the government, put the government's feet on the fire and say, do what you promised to do. You propose, it be evaluated, and Shall I continue?
We've run out of time. Just in a minute. We've run out of time. In a minute, please, as we wind up.
So what will happen is that, so it is demanding that you evaluate at the entry point, you have a tight management of it so that waste is minimized, and thirdly, that Parliament plays its role. Parliament must be able to rigorously sanction and review these agreements and not just simply, let it pass, as has happened. It also contains management of county bills, county borrowing as well. So that counties, when they begin borrowing, they don't sort of run away. We have seen that in Nigeria and other subnational governments borrowing out of hand.
Thank you so much.
It's been delayed to come to the floor. I hope it will come to the floor very soon.
We wait and see what members of parliament will decide on your bill. Nambale, Member of Parliament, Sakwa Bunyasi, talking to us about that initiative he's taken as a way of trying to tame the government's appetite on borrowing. My name is Brenda Zedder. I'm rushing because I need to pave way for my colleague Cecilia Keshamadhuva, who's already in studio for Lau Mashinani. Enjoy the rest of your viewing, and thanks to the men and the women